Tonight, 4 federal party leaders go head-to-head in the first of back-to-back debate nights. This one in French, starting earlier than planned and without the Green Party. Thanks for joining us and welcome here to Montreal. We are just outside the Radio-Canada building, site of tonight's debate, a chance for party leaders to speak directly to French Canadians and to voters in seat-rich Quebec. So this is the campaign's only French language debate, and from Trump to tariffs to affordability, it covered a lot of ground and not without controversy. First up, it was moved up because of a Montreal Canadiens game. And then just hours ago, the Greens' invitation was rescinded. More on that part a little bit later, but let's start with the story that played out on tonight's stage. Ashley Burke was tracking it all. So Ashley, so much of the focus was on Mark Carney.
Adrienne, the Liberal leader had a lot at stake. He's leading in the polls, and that made Mark Carney a target. He came under attack from everyone.
You're just like Justin Trudeau. You have exactly the same policies, the same approach. We need change. And you, Mr. Carney, you do not embody change.
You represent the ultra-rich.
Mr. Poilievre is not Justin Trudeau. I'm not Justin Trudeau either, okay? In this election, the question is, who is going to succeed? Who is going to face Mr. Trump?
Same parties, same ministers, same caucus, same ideology, same hostility against Quebec. It's not just because the leader changes that the philosophy will magically change overnight.
Carney was the least comfortable in French on stage, but kept up and didn't have any big missteps. He did have to defend his promise to bring down the government's operational spending without making cuts to programs like healthcare.
These are Harry Potter financial frameworks. You need a lot of magic to make it work. There needs to be more money, but we're going to do cuts. They want to be more conservative than the Conservatives.
We've started with the cost of living. We have to cut taxes for the cost of living.
What Mr. Blanchet said is true. You were talking about a magic spell here, Mr. Carney.
We need to catalyze private investment in our economy to create new and good jobs. That's the first thing we need to do. In terms of transfers to provinces for healthcare, yes, there are limits to the federal government's activity. No new programs, no.
So, Ashley, I think no surprise to anybody, Donald Trump's trade war was a huge part of the debate night.
Adrienne, all of the leaders made the case why they believe that they're the best person to take on Donald Trump. And we saw the NDP go after the Conservatives leader, trying to suggest that he's just like Trump.
No one will be able to control the decisions of Donald Trump, but we can control our economy, our domestic economy, by overturning liberal economic policies that have weakened our country and made us more dependent on the Americans.
The issue is, Mr. Poilievre,
well,
you would make Canada more like the United States. You would Americanize our healthcare system, privatize it.
The leaders will face off again tomorrow on stage, this time in English.
All right, Ashley Burke in Ottawa, thank you. Okay, so why don't we bring in here CBC News Chief Political Correspondent Rosemary Barden and host of Power and Politics, David Cochrane. You two have been cuddling up right alongside me here. We're sort of sharing the one heater, taking in the debate, going through the key moments in the hours after. Rosie, what was your primary takeaway from this?
I mean, I'll start with the fact that I thought it was an effective debate. I thought our colleague Patrice Roy did a good job of moderating. I thought people were able to make their points clearly and engage with one another. But I don't think that you would watch that debate as a Quebecer or a French-speaking Canadian and see something different that you hadn't already seen, or that you wouldn't suddenly reconsider your position in terms of where we are. And that, of course, is because of Donald Trump. That huge question has framed so much of this election. And if the answer was somewhere on that stage tonight, it probably wasn't with the Bloc Québécois, who will never form government, and the NDP, who's very unlikely to do it. Mark Carney, as Ashley pointed out, is the front runner, had the most to lose here, and I don't think he did himself any real damage. His French was definitely an obstacle at times. He had, struggled to get in or explain himself, and Pierre Poilievre did just fine. He wasn't overly aggressive, but he also doesn't have as much at stake here in this French debate. So I'm not sure it changed anything materially. You got a good sense of where people stood on some of the key issues, whether it be immigration, pipeline, climate change, and other things. But it was not the knockout punch moment that some of these leaders needed tonight.
It was interesting watching you two watch the debate because you're both sort of studied political watchers. I was looking to see if anything sort of surprised you. I don't get the impression it did, David.
No, I was looking at this. This was a week in the campaign for Mark Carney as the front runner that was just filled with downside risk, right? Because he had two really important French language Quebec set pieces that he needed to do well in. The Tout le monde en parle interview on Sunday night and this debate this evening. And for someone whose French has been a work in progress throughout this his political career, which goes back 90 days, it improved to the point that he got really through both of these events without damage and maybe even with a little bit of benefit from his performance based on what you sort of see in the reviews and the assessments of it. So, coming into this tonight, he needed to either really be hammered or to really hammer himself. And then I don't think that's what happened. I mean, he came out of this, I think, just fine. Everything you hear from the Liberals is they think that all the campaigns are texting to say their guy won. That happens every debate. A poll with a margin of error of 100%. But, Mark Carney did not get beat up. He did not lose. He did not make a big mistake. He did not screw up tonight. And that is a big win when you are the odds-on favorite to win in all the key parts of the country. You need to win.
One French debate. This was it. Did it change anything in Quebec, do you think?
Yves-Francois Blanchet, also had a lot at stake here tonight. This was the moment where he had to find an opportunity to make his case to Quebecers. He had to try and show Quebecers that Mark Carney does not understand Quebec. He didn't do that second part. The first part, he did pretty effectively. If you are concerned that Mark Carney cannot defend Quebec's interest at a negotiating table with Donald Trump, if you are concerned he's more worried about the Ontario automobile sector than what's happening in Quebec, and that he might not go as far as is needed to protect Quebec language and identity and culture, he put those cards on the table. The problem is that Mr. Carney has said that he will do his best. He seems to understand what Mr. Blanchet is trying to project here. So I don't know that changed anything in a big way for Mr. Blanchet and for the Bloc Québécois tonight, but it may have stopped the bleeding, which I think is equally important for them.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. So if tonight was Yves-Francois Blanchet's night, I suppose that makes tomorrow Pierre Poilievre's.
Pierre Poilievre, this is his real chance to try to turn and salvage what was a seemingly inevitable election victory that now looks like a pretty probable loss at this stage in the campaign. And it's also Jagmeet Singh's opportunity to try to save official party status for the NDP. The polls would suggest that they're going to lose at least half, if not 2/3 of their caucus right now. That will put them below the 12 seats you need for official party status. He needs to get back into the relevancy game in English Canada in a big way, because if neither of the leaders are able to do this, it's not just this election that's kind of on the line, it's probably their careers as leaders that are on the line. If Jagmeet Singh in his third election sees further diminishment of the NDP, there's just no way he can credibly stick around. And if Pierre Poilievre goes from a 25-point lead in the polls and a mountain of cash from fundraising and loses the fourth straight election to the Liberals for the Conservatives, and Mark Carney comes out of this with a majority government, it's very difficult to see how Mr. Poilievre sticks around as leader of the Conservative Party. He has enormous support and control within the party as it is, but the party as it exists is not punching through in Ontario the way they want it to do, even with the Trump factor at play. So we'll see what he's able to do tomorrow night, but this is his last real set-piece chance to change the thought process in the final days before voting.
But it's not over yet, right?
No,
and you saw a calm, capable Pierre Poilievre, but we also know he's an aggressive fighter, and if he wants to let that loose tomorrow and try and hurt Mr. Carney, he will do that, and he will do it because his political future is at stake.
A lot more than that's at stake.
That's right.
Okay. All right. David, Rosie, thanks very much. We will see, Rosie, we'll see you again. You're not going anywhere for a special edition of Ad Issue in about 20 minutes. No, it's not Thursday, but it is an Ad Issue night here. So as we watched that debate, lots of things were said, and the CBC News fact-check team was also watching very carefully. Jonathan Gatehouse is joining us now to talk about what it was that caught that team's attention. So, Jonathan, we heard one figure in particular that may have made viewers sit up and take notice. It was about Canada's future population. So just to remind people, here's what Pierre Poilievre said.
And I also have to say that I reject the Century Initiative, which is a Liberal policy to balloon Canada's population to 100 million people. That's extreme.
So do the Liberals, Jonathan, have a plan to increase Canada's population to 100 million?
The short answer is no. That number comes from a 2019 report from a nonprofit group called the Century Initiative, who are arguing that Canada needs to hit the 100 million mark by the year 2100 in order to supercharge the economy. It's not a Liberal policy. Carney has attended Century Initiative events in the past, and he recently appointed the group's co-founder to his Council of Advisors on Canada-US relations, but Carney has never indicated that he supports the 100 million figure.
Okay, so that's useful. One of the sharper exchanges tonight, Jonathan, was between Jagmeet Singh and Pierre Poilievre on the subject of affordable housing and the Conservative leader's record when he was in Stephen Harper's cabinet. So why don't we have a listen to what was said there?
He only built 6 homes
200,000
when he was in power.
Can I answer?
We know the answer.
Can
it's
I
6.
answer? It was 200,000 that year, and the cost of the average home was $450,000. So thanks very much for reminding everyone of my record. It was a good record.
Okay, so huge gap, right? 6 versus 200,000. What is really going on there?
Yeah, I mean, both the NDP and the Liberals have attacked Poilievre's record as housing minister. The first thing, the Conservatives didn't have a named housing minister. Poilievre did spend 9 months as Minister of Employment and Social Development, where he oversaw the Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation. The 6 houses number refers to the nonprofit, or community housing units that were built in the 2015-16 fiscal year. But that ignores the ones the CMHC built in partnership with the provinces or territories. If you count those, the number is more like 4,200. Poilievre's counterclaim isn't accurate either. His 200,000 number refers to the total housing units built in 2015, detached homes, condos, and apartments. Only a fraction of those would have been classified as affordable or have had anything to do at all with the government in Ottawa.
And the leader of the Bloc Québécois, Yves-Francois Blanchet, usually takes center stage in the French language debate. Was there anything he said that you think needs a fact check?
Yeah, there was one particular claim about Mark Carney's position on pipelines. Here's what the Bloc leader said.
Mid-February, British Columbia. You, like all other Canadian leaders, said something in English that was, if necessary, you would use the executive emergency powers. You said it. I heard it again yesterday. You would force pipelines through Canada and through Quebec.
No.
So Carney has talked about creating energy corridors for things like pipelines and railways, power lines, all sorts of energy infrastructure. And so, for that matter, has Pierre Poilievre. But the new Liberal leader has not said that he would force them through Quebec or any other province.
Jonathan Gatehouse, this is really useful. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
So let's take a minute now to really dig into what it is that makes the race for Quebec so important. With 78 seats up for grabs, Quebec holds a substantial amount of power. And right now, the CBC News poll tracker shows that weight is leaning Liberal. The party sitting at 42% of the popular vote, compared to about 23% for the Conservatives and 25% for the Bloc Québécois. Translated to seats, if the election was held today, the Liberals would win between 41 and 48. The Bloc, 15 to 23. The Conservatives, 12 to 14. But those are still, of course, projections. And history proves Quebec can be a wild card. Let's take a trip back to 1984. Brian Mulroney's Progressive Conservatives cruising to a massive majority with a big assist from Quebec.
Le Bloc québécois est souverainiste.
Then in 1993, just after the formation of the Bloc Québécois, that party immediately rode a wave of support to become the official opposition in their first general election.
Spring is here, my friends, and a new chapter begins.
Speaking of waves, an orange crush washed over the province less than 2 decades later, helping Jack Layton become leader of the opposition.
Sunny ways, my friends, sunny ways.
Most recently, Quebecers propelled Justin Trudeau to his only majority government in 2015. So 4 transformative elections, 4 different winners in the province. And in just 12 days, another chance to help determine Canada's future. So one leader missing from tonight's debate was the Green Party's Jonathan Pedneau. He was cut just hours before the French language broadcast. David Thurton breaks down that decision and what it means for his party.
Green co-leader Jonathan Pedneau was supposed to drop the party's policy platform. Instead, he was dropped from the debate stage. The last-minute decision after he acknowledged pulling some Green candidates to prevent Conservatives from benefiting from vote splitting.
We took the decision in other cases to be the adult in the room.
But according to the Debates Commission, because the Greens intentionally reduced the number of candidates, it no longer met the criteria to justify inclusion.
Their last-minute decision to exclude the Green Party of Canada from the leaders' debate is not only unjust and baseless, because we met the criteria, it is undemocratic.
The decision was delivered just 12 hours before the debate, shocking party veterans.
I think it's unfortunate. I think now more than ever it's important to have Green voices in these debates on the national stage discussing climate policy.
It's very clear that a mistake was made within the Debates Commission.
The decision a blow for the struggling party.
Would you consider voting for the Green Party in this election?
Well, from what I know, they're not very popular.
I would say I'm pretty skeptical.
To say it's challenging for the Green Party is a profound understatement.
This pollster says the debates could have allowed the Greens to reverse their slump. According to the CBC's poll tracker, popular support hovers around 2%.
It's not just down to the single digits, but barely registering a pulse in this particular election.
Pedneau is not giving up. He said he will explore every possible option to challenge the decision ahead of the English language debate Thursday. David Thurton, CBC News, Montreal.
The English language leaders debate is tomorrow. We will have extensive coverage again. The debate gets underway at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can stay with us after it for full coverage and analysis. Now, with U.S. tariffs hanging over this election, many are looking to bolster trade within Canada.
With President Trump taking direct aim at Canada's economy, it can't be business as usual.
How Ontario's proposed interprovincial trade legislation aims to soften the blow from the trade war. We have more special coverage ahead following the French language leaders debate. We are back from Montreal right after the break. Look at this beautiful place. We're in Montreal tonight after a pointed French language debate between Canada's main party leaders. They sparred over tariffs, immigration, so much more, laying out their politics for voters. We will, of course, dig deeper into the big moments in just a few minutes. Now, the debate inevitably covered Donald Trump's trade war, a key reason why boosting trade within Canada has suddenly become so urgent. Jamie Strachan shows us how Ontario Premier Doug Ford is proposing to lower barriers to interprovincial trade.
Few have handled the so-called elbows-up approach to trade like Ontario Premier Doug Ford. The hats, the shirts, now the talk.
With President Trump taking direct aim at Canada's economy, it can't be business as usual.
Now a move to bolster trade within Canada, Ford not looking south but east and west.
We need to work together to build a more united, more competitive, more self-reliant Canadian economy.
The new legislation would lower Ontario's interprovincial trade barriers and encourage other provinces to follow suit. He also signed agreements with the premiers of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick.
We have to seize this moment, we have to act on this moment, and make sure that we open up true free trade across Canada.
This moment driven by U.S. President Donald Trump.
I always say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me in the dictionary.
His on-again, off-again tariffs have stoked unprecedented economic nationalism.
I think it's really good for the Canadian people to support our local businesses.
We have to do whatever possible to feel really independent.
That's it. Risky. Ford predicts lower costs and more variety, like the ability to order alcohol from other provinces and for workers in certain jobs to more easily move between provinces. National independence, a key issue in Ottawa as well.
The federal government is leading by committing to legislate the end of all federal barriers to interprovincial trade by July 1st.
It all may make Canadians feel better, but experts warn it certainly won't replace doing business with the U.S.
May help cushion the blow a little bit, but I think it's maybe being oversold. But I'm all for that in the sense that anything that gets some political momentum to do something good, it's the one thing we have control over.
The question now, whether it catches on across the country. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
The governor of California says his state is launching a legal challenge against Donald Trump's tariffs.
No state will be impacted more than the state of California as it relates to the unilateral authority that's been asserted by the Trump administration to impose the largest tax increase in modern American history.
California is the first state to file a lawsuit arguing Trump doesn't have that unilateral authority to enact tariffs and that they require congressional authority. And a U.S. federal judge has ruled there's probable cause to charge the Trump administration officials with criminal contempt for ignoring his order to turn planes around that were carrying hundreds of deportees bound for a notorious El Salvador mega prison. He is giving officials a chance to remedy the violation, or they could face prosecution. The White House is appealing the ruling. Well, this is a historic night for Canadian soccer.
We're very proud that this is a league coast to coast, and it is Canadian.
Coming up, the inaugural game of the new Women's League and the pride of the soccer legends who started it. Plus, our coverage of the French language leaders debate continues. Rosie will be here with a special edition of That Issue. From making life more affordable to protecting women's rights, Canada's four main party leaders battled for votes in the French language debate. So whose message landed? Who took the most heat? Rosie and the At Issue crew have that analysis in 2 minutes. Now, this was a milestone moment in Canadian sports tonight. The country's first professional women's soccer league has officially launched in Vancouver. Georgie Smythe now with the long journey to this landmark season.
It's game day for Canada's first professional women's soccer league.
Every decision we're making is to build women's soccer in this country, so it's now a real strength for us globally.
The Northern Super League, a dream years in the making, built from scratch by co-founder and former national team member Diana Matheson. She says Canada needed its own women's league to build on past wins and achieve more.
We have the opportunity to build one of the best women's professional soccer leagues in the world. Really, for the first time in the last 5 or 6 years, women's professional sport has been treated like a business, and it's at the beginning. And there's this growth industry that's only going to continue for the next 2 decades.
The league begins play with 6 teams from across the country: Vancouver Rise, Calgary Wild, AFC Toronto, Ottawa Rapid, Montreal Roses, and Halifax Tides.
We're very proud that this is a league coast to coast, and it is Canadian.
Soccer legend Christine Sinclair co-owns Vancouver Rise.
Christine Sinclair,
and like Matheson, became a force off the field, fighting for years for equality in opportunity and pay for female athletes.
As players, we are constantly told that our compensation, or lack of, was all that Canada Soccer could afford.
Even against the sport's governing bodies. The league's leadership was asked to reflect on the hard-fought battle to get here.
I don't think we're going to let Sink answer that one.
But there's more to do, they say. They want more teams and stadiums to support the league becoming one of the best in the world. Half of the league's players have come from overseas, but all hope to inspire Canada's next stars too.
This means a lot, and I don't think we know how much it means until we actually get started.
There is some poetry to Vancouver and Calgary playing the league's opening game. They were the first 2 teams to sign on and begin this historic league. Georgie Smythe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now, let's break down tonight's French language leaders debate. Rosie's here with a special edition of At Issue.
that's the issue.
Hi there, I'm Rosemary Barton here with some of the scenes from the French language debates tonight. Lots to get into with the Ad Issue panel. They've joined us, and they're going to join us again tomorrow. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj. Good to see you all. Let's just start with who gained anything from this debate, and maybe that's the wrong question because maybe nobody did. But Chantal, do you think that anyone came out of this night in a better shape than they came in?
Yes, but it doesn't change anything to the dynamics in this province in the sense that I'm going to say Mark Carney came out unscathed. None of the punches from the other leaders really landed. And that, by definition, means that he gained because he's got this debate behind him. And by all accounts, it was one of the last best chances for the other parties to change or to reverse the pro-liberal trend that has been manifest in every poll since the election was called.
Okay, and I want to come back to the people that didn't maybe get to where they needed to get to make a difference. But Andrew, your thoughts on whether anyone came out ahead tonight? Not a winner. I'm not asking for a winner. I would never dare ask for that.
Well, you know, when you come in several points ahead nationally and 20 points or more ahead in Quebec, then you win by simply not losing. He didn't hurt his cause, and therefore he helped his cause. Yeah. Conversely, Pierre Poilievre, who needed to make ground on him, didn't help his cause, and in that way hurt his cause. The onus was on him and on Yves-Francois to make yards in this race and in this debate, and they really didn't. I was struck by the fact that, you know, when the Liberals are 25 points ahead of you, you're really not going to turn that around in a debate. The only chance that either of them got, I think, to claw back some seats in Quebec is to make the anti-Liberal vote coalesce around one party or the other, the Bloc or the Conservatives. And they spent more time attacking Mr. Carney than they did dealing with each other, and I think they missed an opportunity.
Althea?
I will agree that I think Mark Carney had the best performance that of all of the leaders because the stakes were so high, because he is the primary challenger to all the opposition parties at the moment in Quebec, not just across the country, but in Quebec. And so he had the most to lose. And he didn't step into anything that was problematic. I think Jagmeet Singh, up until the very last moment, probably would have had a good night. I think a lot of people would have been, if they're tuning in for the first time. I know it's not the first time he's on that stage, but you know, my mother was commenting to me recently about Jagmeet Singh's French. She's a francophone. But then he started arguing with the moderator about not having enough time and being cut off when he talked about healthcare. So I think that, sorry for him. I think if you're a conservative or a liberal, you're probably happy with how your leader did. May I just note, though, that while the race in Quebec is incredibly important, the debate that actually sunk the Liberals last time and was a boon to the Bloc Québécois was actually the English debate. It was a Bill 21 question that happened in the English debate, not the French debate. So while, you know, Mark Carney may have walked off unscathed, it doesn't mean that any issues that percolate with regards to Quebec might not come up tomorrow, and that could cause the Liberals some problems.
Well, if we're going to go there, can we
there?
note that the person who scored for the Bloc Québécois was the actual moderator and none of the other leaders in that previous debate? I'm not expecting Steve Bacon to go down that particular road as the moderator tomorrow.
No, but you can see Yves-Francois Blanchet doing it.
Yeah. But I'll get to
But Yves-Francois Blanchet's
in a moment.
Big
Go
night
ahead,
was
Chantal.
tonight. Let's be serious.
That's right.
Yves-Francois Blanchet's big night was tonight. The reason why the last debate was a big night for him wasn't because people were watching, but because of the indignation that he managed to build out of it, and the sense that Quebec had been attacked through him. That's a very different proposition. Now, that being said, I don't know. I expected Mr. Poilievre to have more of a dominant presence on the stage. There were moments when I wondered if he was still on the podium. Yves-Francois Blanchet was looking for a handle, and I don't think he managed to find it. And Jagmeet Singh did. Yes, I mean, none of them had a bad debate. but
No.
there was no sense that people who were thinking of voting Liberal in this province would have come away thinking I'm missing out on something by not going with one of the other three.
No, I mean, it was a good debate. It was well moderated, and lots of people, there was lots of things said about different topics. Andrew, yeah.
Yeah, it was a very well-run debate. The format was good from the standpoint of democracy and a better understanding.
Sure.
At least the format was. But what is good for democracy in that case is not necessarily good for the opposition parties, because it's harder to land a haymaker. It's harder to create a kind of chaotic situation where somebody can really mess up. So, you know, it was hard to push Mark Carney out of his comfort zone. You couldn't sort of gang up on him with a free-for-all the way we've seen in some debates where everyone's talking over each other.
Sure.
But as I say, from the standpoint of actually understanding what they were saying, that was better.
Let's talk about Mr. Poilievre, because Chantal alluded there, Althea, to Mr. Poilievre. She sometimes wondered whether he was there. I would imagine that was partly intentional, that they want Mr. Poilievre to be calm, prime ministerial. They don't want him to be attacking. And I wonder whether you think that worked for him, given that he didn't have as much at stake at all as Mr. Carney.
I think on some key messages, he succeeded. Like, he talked to Quebecers that live in the regions about how he was going to get rid of the Liberals' electric vehicle mandate, that they could keep their cars and their trucks, and that he would build more highways. He spoke to a very segmented group of the province, and I don't think that was not on purpose. He was very clear that he would pass through pipelines, even if some provinces and Indigenous groups say they don't want it, which is unconstitutional, but we'll get to that later, I'm assuming. Where I think that it was interesting is that balance. And you can tell that he's kind of struggling with it, because yes, he needs to act prime ministerial. And in Quebec, I think he's been given the advice that Quebecers don't like it when people fight. But at the same time, a lot of the comments that you hear from Pierre Poilievre on the campaign trail, whether it's in his press conferences or in his rallies, about Mr. Carney, that he is unethical, that he has questions to answer on his financial dealings, that he was, the head of Brookfield's funds that have offshore, who were set up in offshore tax havens. The type of criticism that we hear over and over and over from Mr. Poilievre was nowhere on the stage tonight. So that was an interesting strategy choice from them.
Yeah.
Well,
but attacking personally during a debate would be kind of odd. Yeah, Chantal, then Andrew.
No, but it's also that if you're going to stay on topic, and we saw what happened to Jagmeet Singh when he tried to go off topic to talk about healthcare. And by the way, if you're going to do the healthcare thing, maybe better to keep it for tomorrow night, because in this province, healthcare is widely, universally considered a provincial responsibility. And so no one is thinking that Jagmeet Singh is going to come to the rescue and hire doctors and nurses. But on Pierre Poilievre's performance, let's be serious here. Someone tonight needed a game changer to walk away from this debate, to say, I accomplished my goals. And that did not happen to any of the three. We can pick and choose this and that sentence. Vehicle mandates, by the way, in this case, are a provincial legislation backs them. So I'm not too sure that most Quebecers knew exactly what he was talking about some conspiracy to stop people from driving their cars. But we are here to say, will this change the nature of the election campaign going forward? Not in Quebec at all.
20 seconds, Andrew.
Well, there's no doubt that this was a more prime ministerial tone that Poilievre struck today. The problem is he needed to strike that tone back in, let's say, January. You can't just show up 10 days before the election and suddenly have a change of demeanor. And he wasn't able to inject more policy differences, which he needs to do to get the focus off of leadership.
Okay, we're going to take a short break here. That was a good first round. When we come back, we'll keep the conversation going about the debates, what we can expect from tomorrow, what happened to the Green Party today. All of that is next. Welcome back. The At Issue panel here to discuss a little bit of what we saw tonight, what we're watching for tomorrow. Let's bring in everyone. Chantal, Andrew, Althea. I want to do one round, if I can, on what happened with the Green Party today. Althea, were you surprised the commission said, we had criteria, we don't think you met it, and so you're out?
I'm surprised the decision came to the party at 7:20 or something this morning. A lot of people were raising concerns about the Greens not meeting the 3 criteria. Basically, they had to have an MP elected in the House. Obviously, they have 2, so they met that. They needed 4% of support before the deadline. They didn't have that. And they needed like 90% of candidates before the deadline, which they did have, but they no longer have. So in a way, they're both kind of right. Like the party saying, well, we met the criteria as laid out because they did meet it at the time it was laid out. And there was a specific date reference in that criteria. And the commission coming up and now saying, well, you don't meet it now. Well, is the criteria that you don't meet it now before the debate, or is the criteria that you didn't meet it at the date that the debate commission had set out? So I can see why they're very upset. And frankly, the Green Party's entire strategy for this election and for the next decade rested on their new co-leader, Jonathan Penneau, having this national stage to introduce himself as the next wave of leadership to replace Elizabeth May. And now they're starved of that. And you can understand why they're also upset that Yves-Francois Blanchet only speaks to Quebecers and he's on stage 2 nights. And most Canadians in their ridings can vote for a Green MP and they don't, or Green candidate, and they don't have somebody on that stage representing the party ideology that most aligns with them.
Chantal, quickly.
The Green Party assured the commission when the invitation was issued that it would have 90% of 343 candidates. And then when the nomination closed, they were short about 100 from 343. And then they were giving interviews all week to say they actually gave up running candidates in many seats to make more room for progressive candidates. Well, they didn't give up, by the way, 60 or 70 seats in that fashion. So at some point, you either live by the rules or you don't. 2 points. Why did it take the commission this long? As far as I know, the decision was taken yesterday afternoon. And to tell you the truth, it came out 5 minutes after I went to Radio-Canada and counted how many podiums were left and found that where there had been 5, there were 4. So yes, I had a tip that something was happening. But still, I don't know when they were planning to announce it. Frankly, that is what I do, basic journalism. I went into Radio-Canada to do a radio hit. I counted the chairs, and there were only 4 left for the leaders.
See, even Chantal Hébert does basic journalism still.
Well, 5 minutes later, suddenly they announced that they were doing this. So why did it take so long? Why no due diligence? You either have rules or you don't. And if you have rules, then you want to check that those rules are being respected. And let's add to this the improvisation over the change in time. The schedule for the NHL comes out in July. So the last game of the season for the Montreal Canadiens was tonight as of last July. And I'm not going to go into the accreditation and the scrums that we just watched, which
we won't do
beg
that.
questions as to the judgment of the commission.
Okay, quickly, Andrew, and then I just want a quick go around on what you're going to watch for tomorrow. Andrew.
Yeah, I really don't have a lot to add. Althea said they're both right. I think they were both wrong.
Okay, there you go. Okay, let's look at what you're going to watch for tomorrow, Althea.
Well, if anything happens that changes the current trajectory, because so far nothing has. So can any of the opposition leaders land anything on Mark Carney that makes people doubt his ability to lead? Or his, as we've seen in pressers and whatnot, or his ethics or values, because we haven't seen any of that really stick at the moment.
Chantal?
This was the best opportunity for the opposition leaders to catch Mark Carney looking like a deer caught in the headlights because of his challenges in French. Tomorrow we won't have a language challenge. So I expect an informative debate, but I'm not sure that you can turn this election around on a debate performance anymore.
Is there anything that Pierre Poilievre could do tomorrow, Andrew, that would change the direction a little bit? I mean, we are seeing a little bit of tightening in polls, but maybe not in the areas where the Conservatives need it.
A little bit. It's a long shot. The hour is very late. We're however many days we are to election day. The problem for the Conservatives all through this campaign is that the Liberals have been hugging close to them on policy and therefore keeping all the focus on Donald Trump and who's the best leader to deal with Donald Trump. He's not going to move people off of Carney just by attacking him and calling him names or accusing him of various things. I think that's been settled in this thing. The only chance he's got is to try to get the focus back on policy. And I know this is a long shot, but maybe he needs to inject some new policy proposal that can get people talking about him and get the focus back on policy.
Could Jagmeet Singh do anything to improve his outcome tomorrow, do you think, Althea? Like, let's not talk about winning, but could he do anything to improve things?
I think Jagmeet Singh's primary purpose at the moment is to safeguard the seats that he has and to convince New Democrats not to vote for the Liberal Party. That's what he needs to do tomorrow. I just want to flag something, kind of building on what Andrew was saying. I think we need to stress how unusual and rather anti-democratic it is that we do not have a fiscal costing of any of the party's platforms. And one of the reasons why the focus is on leadership is because we don't have any material on which to judge these leaders' election plans and what they plan to do when they get to government.
Yeah, we are going to get that in the coming days from Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney. Last word to you, Chantal, quickly.
It's going to be really hard for anyone to change the conversation from who is the best prime minister. That means it's kind of a toss-up. If Pierre Poilievre is very strong, then the people who would vote New Democrat but are spooked by him will flock even more to the Liberals. And vice versa. So the dynamics of this are hard for any of the opposition leaders.
Hard to turn. I got to leave it there. Thank you for being here live tonight. I'll see you all back here tomorrow. Chantal, Andrew, and Althea, and Adrienne, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Rosie. Up next, a Toronto man honors the people who saved him as a boy.
I went out in a rubber raft and the wind caught me and pushed me out.
His thank you 57 years later in our moment. Check this out. The man on the left is David Blackmore, pictured here revisiting Lake Ontario 57 years after a pretty close brush with death. His thank you to the first responders and the Coast Guard captain who saved him all those years ago makes our moment.
Step nice and slow. Grab on anything you may need. Okay. Yep. When I was 10 years old, I was rescued from Lake Ontario. I went out in a rubber raft and the wind caught me and pushed me out. And it was a freezing day like it is today. And this is the anniversary of that day. Woo! And I realized, oh, there's a boat coming to rescue me, and they came straight at me and then pulled me up. And that was the rescue. And it was Captain Hodge, yeah. He was an incredible person. He became kind of almost like a mentor to me. He asked my parents to thank all these people, including the police. But I don't think my parents ever did that. I was never sure. So I reached out just, recently. And that's when they invited me down here and my family for a tour to kind of revisit the scene. It's a bit scary. I see the places where it all happened. I can still enjoy the water with respect.
I bet. You got to appreciate at the time that rescue involved the Royal Canadian Air Force, dozens of police officers. That little guy, David, was out on a tiny inflatable raft for 12 hours. And when the Coast Guard finally got him, he was 8 kilometers from shore. No wonder it stayed with him. Thank you for being with us. We have more special election coverage tomorrow. The English language leaders debate gets underway at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And you can stay with us after the debate for analysis and much more. I'm Adrienne Arsenault in Montreal. For all of us here, take care.